Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We'd like to present information to you about the Livonia Public Schools 2021 bond issue proposal coming before our community in just a few short weeks on Tuesday, May 4th. We'll begin by sharing a presentation with you this evening, highlighting some background information with regard to school funding, then moving on to a brief review of the 2013 bond, and then moving forward with our plans for the future as we look at the proposal for the 2021 bond. If you have any questions during the presentation, please share them at lpsbond@livoniapublicschools.org, and we will be happy to answer them at the conclusion of our presentation.
To start off, we wanted to give the community some background information to help you understand why the school district is coming to you right now asking for this bond proposal. So how schools are funded in Michigan are based on a proposal that passed back in 1994, Proposal A, which established a per pupil funding. And the purposes of Proposal A were to reduce property taxes, as well as reduce the disparity across districts. So trying to shrink the gap between lower paid districts and higher paid districts. And Proposal A did largely accomplish these goals. One thing that is important to note was that Proposal A was never calibrated to the actual cost of educating a child. That's based on a report by Dr. David Arson. He's a professor out of the Michigan State University, and that is available online if anybody's interested in that. The other item to make note is that Proposal A did not address school facilities. They didn't take into consideration the cost of upkeeping schools. So school districts really have two different mechanisms for raising funds for facility needs. One is a sinking fund and the other is a bond. So I will spend a minute explaining what a sinking fund is. This can be used for the continual upkeep of school buildings, facilities, and surrounding school sites. It's used on a pay-as-you-go basis. That means that as we collect the money, we can spend it. It isn't, unlike a bond, it's not like a large influx so that we can tackle larger projects, but it does help us handle a number of projects on our 10-year facility assessment. And I'll give you an example on the next slide, some pictures of how we're using our sinking fund dollars. The community was generous enough to approve our sinking fund request in 2019, and that does generate approximately $7 million a year for the school district. Right now, we are primarily using sinking fund dollars for a few main projects, paving improvements, boilers, and roofs. And with the passage of the 2019 sinking fund, we can also use it for instructional technology. So we just brought our first mobile device purchase to the board for approval this fall for devices for our kindergarteners and first graders. School districts can also pass bonds, and like a sinking fund, there is specific uses for those funds. It can be used to defray the cost of purchasing, erecting, completing, remodeling, improving buildings, as well as furnishing those buildings or re-equipping those buildings. And it can include things like athletic fields and playgrounds. We can also use funds to purchase school buses. Unlike a sinking fund that is spent as the money is collected, with a bond, we actually do get a sum of money up front so that we can target larger scale projects over the course of a summer or really at any time. Unlike a sinking fund, there is some interest cost associated with that because we are getting the money up front, which is paid back over time. The last bond that was supported by our community was in 2013, and it was a $195 million bond proposal. And that too goes to address the needs identified on our 10-year facility assessment. We did want to share some information with the community on what other surrounding communities are doing as far as bond issues. I'll highlight just a couple for you. In Novi Community Schools, they went for a bond a year after us, and they went for a second bond in 2019. In Plymouth Canton, they went for a bond the same year as Livonia Public Schools, and they went for another bond in 2019. And the last one I'll point out is South Lyon, who went for a bond in 2015 and then went out for a second bond in 2020. So perhaps you might have in your mind that bonds are, something that don't come around that frequently. But as we can see, as we look around at our communities, you are seeing bond requests a little bit more frequently. I think a main driver for that is some of the things that we're using bond proceeds for example, technology. Out of our $195 million that was approved in 2013, we spent about $30 million on technology. And while some of those were infrastructure that'll last us a little while, a lot of that was for devices that have a limited life span. We're lucky if we get about 5 to 7 years for that. So we've started this mobile device purchase plan. And so to keep those devices fresh, we need, continually to have a funding source to replace those items. This next slide, it was provided by PFM, our financial advisors. And this is some statistics on the passage rate of school bonds without a millage increase, which is what Livonia Public Schools is proposing this May 4th. We can see in the last couple of years, really high support by the community, up in the 100 to, in the 90% range. So a lot of support for bonds. I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Francis. He's our Director of Operations, and he is going to talk about what we were able to accomplish through the 2013 bond.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. We want to talk for a moment about that 2013 bond that the community had supported in May of 2013, and that we, as a district, had used those dollars, the $195 million, to do a very large refresh and update and renovation at all of our school sites. And some of the items that were included in that bond were very critical, very wonderful, and the update are listed on this page. So in the IT realm, we were able to add items like Wi-Fi in our buildings. We were able to have new servers, and of course, all of that classroom technology, such as the interactive short throw projectors, the sound systems for our students, as well as the document cameras and mobile devices and teacher and employee work computers. All of that came out of the 2013 bond, and those are all planned purchases and cycles. With regard to our facilities, we were able to do a top to bottom renovation in the classrooms with regard to the ceilings, the flooring, the furniture for students, but to go along with lighting and the technology, etc. So we were able to refresh our classrooms. We did some safety and security by building our secure vestibules at our schools, and that was a very important piece, along with some toilet rooms and some other areas and doors, exterior and interior. And then we were also able to purchase new buses. We have a fleet of 110 school buses, and we were able to replace 66 of those through the 2013 bond, trying to replace the oldest that we had in the fleet, and as well as some maintenance equipment for both cleaning our facilities and outdoor equipment. And of course, I mentioned a little bit about furniture. We were able to buy student furniture. We were able to replace and purchase instruments and different classroom equipment, such as in the science labs. And the list really does go on, but the point of this slide is to say that through the support of the community and the 2013 bond dollars, everything that the Board of Education had addressed or wanted addressed was in fact addressed. I think we might have some pictures here, right, Mrs. Smith? We'll run you through a few items. We had mentioned the secure vestibules. We also have our arches at each of our school buildings that has become our branding of sorts, that has the school name on it. So you can see some before and after shots of the front of buildings at Cleveland, Coolidge, Rosedale, Cooper Upper Elementary, and Frost Middle School. We also were able to renovate the Churchill Auditorium and build a new auditorium, or what we call the Performing Arts Center, at Stevenson and Franklin. So the high schools all have new state-of-the-art performing arts centers. We see a picture here of updated classrooms showing student furniture, showing tables, chairs, etc. And I see that there's a main office picture there of Churchill High School. So we were able to get into those main offices as well. Here are some more shots of, in the upper right are a couple buses that are new to the fleet from the bond, and flexible furniture as we look around this page at the different pictures for students. And in the bottom left corner, we were able to replace the elementary school playground equipment, not all of it, but some of it within our budget. So the point of all that is to say that all of the items that the board had identified and targeted to be done in the 2013 bond with those dollars were done. So those promises that were made by the board at that time were kept. Having said that, we knew going into the 2013 bond cycle that there were items that had to be deferred. We had about $275 million worth of need at that time, 8 years ago, 9 years ago as the planning had began. But the board had known that that's a very big number and wanted to defer some projects. So some of the items we were unable to put into the scope of the 2013 bond that were deferred were such large items as the media centers / libraries at all of our schools, and our kitchen lines and serving lines in kitchens at all of our schools. There's also, I had mentioned as we ran through the other items that we did some of the doors, some of the toilet rooms. That is accurate. We did certain ones, but not all of them. There were items that are on this list that you can see were deferred. Another big one was the district-wide air conditioning in our learning spaces. We did not put in air conditioning at that time, as well as items like the field houses, the competition gyms, locker rooms, pools and locker rooms, the science labs in our high schools and our middle schools, computer lab spaces. While the computers in them were purchased with the 2013 bond dollars, the rooms themselves weren't necessarily done. So all the items that were deferred are shown on this list, and there were more. The way that we know and keep up to date on the items that are needed in our district is that we have and then maintain and continually update a 10-year facility plan. This plan actually has every building that we have in the district and all the items related to that building. That includes the envelope, meaning the walls, the roof, the structure itself, as well as the items inside of it, such as the furniture, the rooms, plumbing, electrical, etc., and items outside of it, such as athletic fields and playgrounds. So we continually update this, and we are able to detail to the Board of Education what upcoming needs are. We also keep an independent, a separate 10-year information technology or tech plan that holds all of our upcoming needs. So the reason that's very important for the district is that we know at any point in time what our upcoming needs are. Over the next 10 years, we can say what is needed, and then we can narrow it even tighter to the next 3 years or 4 to 6 years out or 7 to 10 years out. So the board had gathered up all of the needs in the next 3 years, add them up, and then all the needs in the next 4 to 6 years and add them up. As you can see from this slide, that came to $102 million and $108 million respectively. And then when we looked at our technology plan for the district, we see that in the next 6 years, we have about $29 million worth of technology needs that were identified. All of those put together come to $239 million of overall identified needs in the next 6 years. We did back out $42 million, and that's in reference to the sinking fund that Mrs. Smith mentioned. We bring in $7 million a year approximately from the sinking fund, and we are using that on items of need in the buildings, such as replacing boilers and roofs and paving and other items. So we back out that money and we can tell the board during their discussions that there's $197 million of additional funded needed to address all the needs on our 10-year plan.
Some of the current considerations that the board and our district administration thought about is really three key factors. We have a window of opportunity for this no tax rate increase bond issue for this May due to the current debt payments that are falling off as of June. We have the ability to request this 20-year term, $186 million bond issue without any increase in the tax rate, which means that rate would remain the same for residents and businesses while we're able to, at the same time, significantly reinvest in our community. May is the only window of opportunity that we would have that this would be a no tax rate increase. Another important focus for the past several years has been the district's demonstrated stewardship of our financial resources. Over the past handful of years, we have seen steady and consistent growth of our district fund balance. That has increased our financial stability and our ability to meet the needs of students in our classroom. It's also allowed us to receive a more positive bond rating, and also during the regular review, annual review from an outside third party of all of our financial dealings, we have received the highest rate on our district audits. Additionally, during the entire life of the bond implementation, over that 6-year period, every quarter, our owners rep, Plant Moran Cressa, and our district team presented a quarterly dashboard report. That quarterly dashboard report was shared publicly and allowed us to cover the progress being made on the bond, the projects that were currently underway, the dollars that had been expended thus far, and the plans moving forward. You'll see an example of this quarterly dashboard on the screen at this time. We presented 4 of these each year over the 6-year period. We also maintain those quarterly dashboard reports on our district website to have full transparency with our community and our stakeholders with regard to the expenditure of the $195 million bond issue. And finally, just recently, we conducted a refunding of bond debt, resulting in a savings to our taxpayers of over $15 million. So again, that strong fiscal stewardship is something that we know is essential to our Board of Education, to our school community, and certainly to our district administration as we come forward before the community with this request. Finally, Mrs. Smith shared earlier in the presentation a brief review of bond issues in neighboring communities. Our belief is in order for Livonia to lead, to be innovative and continue the excellence in our schools and in our programming across our school district, we need to continue with a reinvestment in our resources and in our facilities. We know that this will lead to both the recruitment and retention of students and continue to make Livonia a destination district for our families, our staff, and our community.
I will jump in here to explain, how we got to this point. So it really does stem back to 2013, as Mr. Francis shared. Back in 2013, we had identified about $275 million worth of need. And again, after much discussion between administration and the board, we settled on a $195 million bond. So we did know back in 2013 that some of these projects were going to be deferred, that we weren't going to get to them. So they've been on, on our radar as items that would need to be circled back to and addressed. And so we continue to have dialogue. Formally had a consideration in 2019 when we were going for either a renewal or a replacement of our sinking fund. And so when we did decide on the 1.6 mil sinking fund, we knew that that would help us with our 10-year facility assessment. But again, it wasn't going to give the district all the necessary funding needed to tackle some of the bigger projects like district-wide air conditioning in our learning spaces and updated media centers. So we've continued to have discussions internally about when we might have an opportunity to come to the community for additional funding and when would be the right time. In 2020, we had those conversations formally with our Board of Education at both committee meetings, study sessions, and then a final decision was made in January 2021 to put this proposal on the ballot for May 4th. And again, what was settled on was a $186 million bond.
So at this time, Mr. Francis, do you want to get us kicked off, and then
Yeah, I
I'll
was
cover
work,
the final items?
Sure. I was working on my mute button there. Sorry. So, in the current needs and the current items that, if this bond were to pass, we want to run through some of the items that we will be working on. So you can see from the slide here that we have a large portion that would be going towards those identified needs from our 10-year facility plan and our 10-year long-term IT plan. We definitely want to go into the media centers and redesign them, working towards the end goal of having a reimagined 21st century learning space in all of our schools, elementaries and secondaries. We also want to get into those kitchens and update them. Most of our kitchens and lines are original equipment and have not been updated since the building was originally built. So they're 50 to 60 years old. We also are going to enhance the HVAC systems, address both air quality, which is currently excellent, but we want to address that while we're in there, putting in air conditioning into our classrooms, labs, offices, the different learning spaces. And we also want to do general facility improvements, meaning that there are things that are unseen, like electrical and plumbing, etc., but also items that are seen, such as doors that are still older and or original, the hardware that goes with them, and those restrooms that we didn't fully renovate. Another large chunk of dollars, again, coming off of our facilities and IT plan, would be simply that I don't want to use the word maintenance, but the continuation of our investment, our technology. We have a cycle of replacement that we need to stay on, and this would be working towards the replacement of things like mobile devices, workstation computers, etc. We also would be looking at items that are safety and security enhancement and also related technology, such as interior and exterior security cameras, the card readers and the swipes that we use for locking our doors, and similar items, including cameras on our buses. We have athletic areas that I had mentioned previously, as well as the elementary playgrounds that we want to return back to and remove the older playscapes and play equipment on our elementary playgrounds. And we also are still going to continue to purchase school buses and maintenance equipment with those bond dollars if it passes.
So some of the other areas, as we look at some of those innovative opportunities that I had mentioned on our prior slide, is really thinking forward about what our community needs are and what our opportunities that we would like to look into in expanding for our students. So the first is the area of STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math, for which we use the Project Lead the Way curriculum. We've currently, for the past 2 years, utilized Project Lead the Way at our middle school and high school. We have many opportunities to expand that programming, not only at those levels, but perhaps start it even sooner. We also want to find a permanent home for our award-winning robotics team. Currently, they're housed in a facility that is not entirely suitable for them, and as that program has continued to grow in its numbers and as well as in its success, we are so proud of what they have to offer our students at both the middle school and the high school level, and we are excited about the opportunity to find a permanent home for them. I'm going to continue on that end of the spectrum with our older students and hop down to that final item that talks about some career technical education enhancements. We have, again, a marvelous Livonia Career Technical Center that provides opportunities for juniors and seniors throughout our district to become career ready in 8 different career pathways. We have many of those pathways which really have been maxed out as far as capacity of how many students we can take into that program. We'd like to look at expanding the facility and the opportunities to our students at the Livonia Career Technical Center, as well as look to expand that STEM pathway. And finally, at the early end of the spectrum, as our community likely knows, we have a very strong and vibrant early childhood program. Many offerings for our families, from infant and child care to preschool and young fives. Excuse me. What we'd like to do is be able to, again, expand those opportunities. That need continues to grow. We do have some limited capacity in those programs. We'd like to create a new state-of-the-art, welcoming and joyful early childhood center. And we're hopeful with the passage of this bond that we will be able to do that in just a few short years.
Next, we wanted to spend a minute to go over what the ballot language is. And this may be small on your screen, and we wanted to let you know this can be found on the Livonia Public Schools website. We have a page on there designated for the 2021 bond proposal. So feel free to pull that up too if you would like to get a closer look. But the ballot is really broken into 3 main areas. The first one is simply asking the community if Livonia Public Schools can sell bonds to raise $186 million of funding for identified projects. In that next group, I know we've gotten the question, couldn't that be worded a little bit more clearly? This really comes from our attorney, and it has to be written this way so that we comply with the laws around bond proposals. But really what it's saying is it's identifying the projects and the scope of the bonds. So as we've gone over some examples with you this evening, you can understand the specific projects that we're going to do. But really in general, it's upgrading our safety and technology. It's improving and expanding facilities and program spaces for academic success. And it's upgrading playgrounds and athletic facilities. The bottom portion is really for, again, informational purposes. And what this says is that this is a 0 mil tax rate increase. So that means if the bond were to pass, the tax rate would not go up. It also says that the bonds can only be used for physical improvements and that it can't be used for salaries and for maintenance or repair costs of facilities. With that, I will mention that we do go through an annual audit by external auditors that come in and take a sampling of our expenditures to make sure that everything that we have spent money on was indeed listed in the ballot as one of the approved projects, make sure that it does comply with the state of Michigan's laws around bond proceeds. And again, that gets audited every single year, and we continue to get a high rating from our auditors that ensure can bring comfort and confidence to our community that the bond proceeds are being spent as we have said that they would be spent.
So that concludes our bond presentation. I'd like to ask Mrs. Jenkins if we've received any questions this evening.
Let me just refresh my inbox here. The email address, at any time, feel free to email us a question regarding the bond. That address is lpsbond@livoniapublicschools.org. And we do not have any questions submitted this evening.
And Mrs. Jenkins, could you share with our community where they can find information on our website?
Sure. livoniapublicschools.org/2021 bond is the shortcut, or you can visit our homepage at livoniapublicschools.org. There's a large graphic right on the front page detailing it's kind of a cover sheet of sorts for the bond program. And click on that graphic, that image, and it'll take you right to the page. On that page, we have all of our materials posted, an FAQ, just lots of good information there.
Thank you. And just a reminder that the vote will take place on Tuesday, May 4th. Absentee ballot voting is also available at this time. Thank you so much for joining us for the presentation this evening. Have a good night.